So, some of the first real leaders I ever met stood at the front of the classroom. I didn't have language for it then. I just knew how certain teachers made me feel. Mrs. Krause, my second grade teacher, had a kind of magic, I guess. She could make a whole room of kids feel safe. I still remember laying my head on her lap while she caressed my hair, my stomach in knots from anxiety. I was way too young to understand. She didn't fix anything really. She just made it safe to be a scared little kid for a minute. Then there was Pat Gaynor, my sort of goofy high school hippie English teacher. We were an unruly 80s crowd, the kind of class that usually eats a teacher alive, you know what I mean? And somehow he kept us in attention wrapped even. He saw something in the rebellious teenager I was. And after I finished college, he actually hired me as his TA. And it took me years to fully understand what those two had in common and what it had to do with leadership at all. They built rooms where people felt safe and open. And I've been chasing that question ever since. Why does it happen with some people and not others? Same room, same job, completely different result. And so I just kept thinking about this throughout all my years of work. And I did what any reasonable person does with a lifelong interest, obsession, really. I collected certificates, probably too many: coaching, breath work, somatics, yoga, a few more I'll spare you. And then at an age when most people are not thinking about winding down, I went back to school for a master's degree in leadership because apparently all those certificates weren't quite enough. Here's the truth underneath it all. I'm a nerd. Social science, behavioral science, psychology, research on how humans actually work. I read that material for fun. I listen to podcasts about it, and I read articles about it, and I keep learning all about it. It keeps pointing me back to one thing I believe down to my core. The most effective leaders are the ones who build spaces where people feel safe and feel like they belong, whether that's at work, at home, everywhere it counts. So this is a long way of saying welcome back to the Fully Mindful. I'm Melissa Chareau, your host, and today it's just me, no guests, no interview. I want to tell you where the show is headed next and why it matters so much to me. We're starting a new series on leadership, personal leadership, and organizational leadership, the way we lead ourselves, and the way that shows up in teams, families, and the communities we're part of. Here's the thing that I've come to believe. Leadership isn't a title you're handed. I mean, it can be, but it isn't all that. It's a set of choices you make over and over about how you show up for other people, how you show up for yourself. And most of us are making those choices in more places than we maybe even realize. And I want to hold both of that in this series: the office, the kitchen, the board meeting, the bedtime negotiation, because the skills matter and they go wherever you are. If you can regulate your own nervous system in a tense staff meeting, you can probably do it when your teenager slams the door. And if you can't do it at home, I'm going to kind of gently prod you on how it's working in the office. I say nervous system on purpose, and you'll hear me say that a lot here on this podcast and in this series. And that's because so much of what we call leadership is, I think, really just self-regulation, wearing a nicer outfit, maybe. So whether you can stay grounded when the pressure spikes, when the people around you catch your calm or catch your panic. We tend to think leadership lives in our decisions, but a lot of it lives in our bodies and whether we're steady enough for anyone else to borrow that steadiness. So let's talk about the different flavors of leadership a little bit, because there are many, and this matters more probably than it sounds at first. Servant leadership came from a man named Robert Greenleaf back in 1970 or so. His idea was simple and a bit radical, still is. The leader serves first. You start by asking what the people around you need to grow, and you build from there. The authority comes second, if it comes at all. You're there to serve the people who are following you. Transformational leadership is another. James McGregor Burns named it also in the 70s, and Bernard Bass built it out from there. There is the leader who lifts people up is what transformational leadership is about. The one who paints a picture of what's possible, challenges you to think harder, treats you like an individual rather than a cog in some kind of wheel. And Bernard Bass gave it 4 pieces, sometimes called the 4 I's, as in the letter I. Idealized influence, inspirational motivation, intellectual stimulation, individualized consideration. In more plain terms, you model it, you inspire it, you stretch people's thinking, and you actually see and connect with each person who is in front of you individually. There's transactional leadership too, which probably gets a bad name that it doesn't fully deserve all of the time. That's the carrots and sticks model. So you do the work, you get the reward. You don't do the work, things don't work out. It sounds cold, and it can be. Certainly, it's also exactly what you want when the building is on fire and someone needs to run the checklist without a group discussion about feelings, right? And then there's authentic leadership, which is more or less what it sounds like. You lead from who you actually are, your values, your story, your real self, all of it, scars and all. And of course, there are lots of other types of leadership and everything in between. I've had bosses in every one of the categories I just mentioned. The servant leader who cleared obstacles out of my way and never once needed credit. The transformational one who saw something in me before I saw it in myself and kept pointing at it until I believed them. And a couple who ran pure transaction, hit your numbers or else. And honestly, some seasons, that's what something was needed in the particular instance. I've also had plenty of toxic leadership and lots of experience with that. That usually comes from a more authoritarian style of leadership. The point isn't that one is more virtuous and the rest are villains. They're tools. You reach for the one that the particular moment or circumstance is really asking for. So now here's what I want you to hear, because this is the whole point. None of these is the right one. Two researchers named Hersey and Blanchard put language to this decades ago. They called it situational leadership. The idea is that the best style depends on the moment and the person in front of you. A brand new hire, for instance, who's scared and unsure, needs something totally different from a seasoned expert who just needs you to get out of the way, maybe needs some slight direction. I've learned this the hard way early in my career. I had one setting: direct, fast, to the point. Here's the answer, let's move on. I learned that in law. Just get to the holding in the case and move on. And it worked really well with some people. It flattened others. And it's taken me years to understand that say, leading a new attorney through their first hearing and leading a 20-year veteran are not the same job, even when the task looks identical on paper. So when someone tells you there's one true style of leadership, be suspicious. The real skill is in being able to read the room, read the person, read yourself, and then choosing what actually serves the people and the moment. One thread I'm going to pull on now and then is what I think of as the unexpected leader. Some of the best leadership I've witnessed has come from people the org chart, if there is one, is completely overlooked. Might be the paralegal who held a whole team together through a brutal trial, or the person who's supposedly 3 levels down who set the tone for how everyone treated each other in the boardroom or the staff room. The parent, the sponsor, the friend who led without ever even grasping that that's exactly what they were doing. Leadership doesn't wait for a promotion. It shows up when someone decides to take responsibility for the people around them. So you'll hear from some folks in this series who would never have called themselves leaders, but they were, and they are. Which brings me to the part that I care most about, belonging. And you can have the perfect leadership style, the right framework, all the training in the world, and it will fall flat if people don't feel like they belong. This isn't soft, it's foundational, and the research is solid. Back in 1995, two psychologists named Baumeister and Leary published a paper arguing that the need to belong is a fundamental human drive. Not a nice to have. Also, I don't know that we needed the research to tell us that. We know that it's a basic need wired in right alongside food and safety. When it's missing, people don't just feel lonely. They perform worse, they get more sick, they check out. And we now know from all the loneliness studies that have been made and the longevity and blue zone studies that people live longer and happier when they're connected and they feel like they belong. Brene Brown, one of my favorites, of course, adds a distinction I think about constantly. She draws this line between belonging and fitting in, where fitting in is when you change yourself to be accepted, and belonging is when you're just accepted as you are. And here's the thing. Fitting in is actually a barrier to belonging because you can't belong somewhere while you're busy hiding who you are, right? Arthur Brooks, one of my favorite social scientists and who writes about happiness in the Atlantic, has a podcast, has recently written a book about finding the meaning of your life, keeps landing in the same place from probably a little bit of a different location. When he studies what makes a life genuinely happy, it comes back to relationships, real connection, people who know you, meaningful work done alongside others. The data is almost embarrassingly consistent here. We are happiest when we are woven into the fabric of something. And I know this one in my bones, not just from the research. I spent a lot of years in rooms where belonging is the entire point, and in a lot of rooms where it wasn't. And in the ones where belonging is the entire point, where people get honest, they stay honest and find out that they're welcome exactly as they are on their worst day with nothing polished. That's the kind of belonging that changes people. And it's not a perk. For some, it's the difference between a life and no life at all. I don't take it lightly, and I try to bring what I have learned in these rooms everywhere else I go. And I still have so very much to learn. This also connects straight to the workplace. Amy Edmondson, a researcher at Harvard, spent years studying what she named psychological safety. I'm sure you've heard the term. Teams where people feel safe to speak up, take risks, admit they don't know something. Her finding going back to 1999 is that those teams learn faster and perform better. Psychological safety is really just belonging with a job title. So why am I building this whole series around this? It's because I think we've overcomplicated leadership and underestimated belonging, and both mistakes cost us. I've watched brilliant, dedicated people burn out and leave really good work because the environment around them was subtly telling them that they didn't quite fit. I've watched teams with average talent do extraordinary things because someone made it safe to be human there. The difference is almost never the strategy. It's whether people feel like they belong. And it's the same at home. The same regulation, the same safety, the same message underneath this is that you matter here. You can be honest here. You belong here. And here's what I've noticed after all these years. The organizations that get this right aren't running some top secret program. They usually have a few people, and it really can just be a few who decided to make it safe to be human, who caught themselves before they snapped, who noticed the person going quiet in the meeting and made room for them, invited them in. That's leadership. It rarely shows up on a performance review, and it changes everything. That's the work. That's what I want to explore with you over the coming episodes. So here's the deal. Over this series, I'll be sitting down with leaders from every kind of field who can talk honestly about what works and what really doesn't. People leading through burnout, people leading through psychological safety, people steering their teams through change, sometimes shifting the entire culture from top down to something more shared. People who lead from the nervous system up, staying steady when everything around them maybe isn't, and people whose leadership showed up in the last place anyone expected. I'll also be devoting some real attention to belonging and community because I think it's the ground, I guess, where everything else grows. So expect episodes, maybe even some experiments on how we actually build leadership. One ask before I go. If you're someone who leads in an unexpected way, or you've got a story about belonging, burnout, or steadying yourself and others through hard seasons in whatever place that might have been, I'd love to hear from you. Come find me on LinkedIn. Send me a message. Tell me what you'd bring here. I read every message. Thanks for being here with me while I laid this out. This series matters a lot to me, and I have a feeling it's going to matter to some of you too. Lead yourself gently this week, then go make a little more room for the people around you to belong. I'll see you next time on The Fully Mindful.